Hello, students of Classroom 313. I know we're not there right now, but anyway, we're going to continue on listening to reading. We are continuing with Boxcar Children, Surprise Island. And you can see that last chapter we read was actually this very picture right here. Anyway, we are starting chapter 8, which is Native American Point, or as the book calls it, Indian Point. Chapter 8. After a long sleep, the children were as good as new. I felt just like starting out again, said Jessie. So do I, agreed Henry. I wonder why Joe was so excited over that shell pile. Let's go ask him. Why do you say that you must see that pile of shells? Began Henry, when they'd found Joe at the hut. Because I'm interested in things like that, answered Joe. A shell pile means that Native Americans must have been on this island. Come right along, Joe, said Benny. I'll show it to you. He took a hold of Joe's hands and tried to pull him up. The children laughed as Joe got on his feet. In a little while, the explorers arrived at the shell pile. What a wonderful thing to find, shouted Joe. Why? Asked Jessie. Joe was looking at some of the broken shells. Well, I'm sure that the Indians made this pile. Do you remember from school that they made shell money called wampum? It's spelled Wampum. That might be something you might want to look up later on Google, wampum. Sometimes they use these quahog shells for the purple part. Quahogs are clams. You think they sat right here to make the wampum? Asked Henry. Yes, and I think they dried clams here too, replied Joe, looking at some unbroken quahog shells. Why? Asked Jessie. Joe laughed and said, These are whole clam shells, so the Native Americans must have sat here to take the clams out of the shells. They used to dry the clams and then eat them later. Now, I may not be pronouncing that word correctly, but it's Quahog, quahog. Jessie knew that, said Benny. She said they sat here for years and years. But I didn't know that they were Native American, said Jessie. Do you think we could find any wampum here? Joe? Asked Henry. No, I don't really. They would save it because it was money. But we might find some old tools that they used. The Native Americans used to smooth the shells on stones and then make the holes with the tools they got from the white men. Let's dig. You can tell us if we find a tool. I'd like to dig, said Joe, but we ought to have something good to dig with. Let's go back and get something from Captain Daniel. I'm too tired, and so is Watch. Henry laughed. You sit right down here with Watch and Violet, and don't go away from here, and don't get into trouble. The rest of us will get all the things and come right back. Remember now. All right, Benny said as he sat down, and you can see that's Joe and all the 4 children, and they've got they're showing the different wampum there. Yeah, interesting picture. Interesting. While you were waiting, you could do some digging with a stick, called Joe. Save everything you aren't sure about. Violet began at once to look over the broken shells. Why don't you look, Benny, she said. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you and I found something good while they are all gone? Let's try. You try, said Benny. I don't care. All I can find is this big chicken leg. Chicken leg? Cried Violet. That's too big for a chicken. Well, maybe a horse then. It's an old bone anyway. I'll save it for Joe. He'll know for sure. Violet dug at the shells. Benny, you know all these shells look as if someone broke them. A lot of the purple part is gone. That means that Joe is right, that they made wampum right here. Of course Joe is right, said Benny. Joe is always right. It seems funny to me, said Violet, that Joe is just a handyman. I shouldn't think he would be working here on this island if he knows so much. Maybe he does something else too, said Benny. And maybe he came here to have a good time and learn things this summer, just like us. Then the others came back. They had clam hooks and a shovel, and Joe had a camera. A camera! You can take a picture of me and watch digging up this Native American. I wish I could, said Joe, laughing. I want to take a picture of the shell pile. You and Watch sit right where you are. This will show how big the shell pile really is. Violet scrambled out of the way. No, 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 said Joe. Don't go. I want you in the picture too. You stand right beside Watch. So Violet stood where she was, and Joe took the picture. He took 4 pictures, one from each side of the pile. Why do you want all these pictures, Joe? Asked Henry. Maybe I'd better tell you something, said Joe. If the people on the mainland knew about this pile, they would be over here with cameras and shovels before we could stop them. You wouldn't like that, would you? Oh, no, cried Benny. We don't want a lot of people over here. You children had better not tell anyone about this shell pile before your grandfather knows, said Joe. All right, we won't, said Henry. We'll tell grandfather when he comes to visit us. Now let's dig. I'd like to do this for a living, Joe. Go to far-off places and dig up old bones and things. Good for you, Henry, cried Joe. It is very interesting work. But let me warn you, it isn't all fun. You might not find anything for a year or even longer. It's just like fishing, said Benny. Exactly, agreed Joe. Maybe you'd like to work with Henry. No, I wouldn't. I'd rather fish because you can eat the fish. You will help us now, won't you? Asked Henry. We need every person we can get. Sure, said Benny. Watch, you can help too. Watch obeyed, but he was soon barked and held up his paw. There was a white bone sticking in it. A fish hook, cried Joe. Right in your paw. Watch. Here, let me take it out. It's a fish hook made from an animal bone. That means Native Americans used to fish here, doesn't it? Asked Henry. I think it does, said Joe. Now, do you want to work just a little more? I'd like to dig under the pile before we go. Sure, said Benny. We're not hungry because we ate so much stew. What do you think we'll find, Joe? I haven't any idea, said Joe. He took the shovel and soon dug quite a big hole. They all got down on their hands and knees to look in the hole. Is that anything? Asked Joe, pointing. It looks like a piece of a dish, possibly. It is a piece of a dish, shouted Joe. Here's another piece, said Jessie, handing it to Joe. I think these are all pieces of a bowl, cried Joe. The children found some more pieces and gave them to Joe. He wiped off the sand and put the pieces together. Yes, this is a cooking bowl, said Joe. I'm sure now that Native Americans lived here. We know now that they used to get clams here, and they made wampum here. We might find more things. This island, it's a wonderful place. Violet could see that Joe kept his eyes on the bowl every minute. That dish tells us more than anything else we have found, said Joe. I don't think so, said Benny, to everyone's surprise. I think my horse's bone tells the most because it tells us that the Indians had horses, see? Benny pointed to the bone sticking up out of the sand. Benny Alden, Joe almost shouted. The Native Americans didn't have horses before the white man came. Where? Where did you find this? On the back of that pile, answered Benny. We're digging on the wrong side, I guess. This is a man's bone, Benny, cried Joe. It's part of a skeleton. Do you know what a skeleton is? Oh, yes, said Benny. All of us have a skeleton inside of us. It's made of bones and stuff. That's right, said Henry. Show us exactly where you found the bone. Right here, said Benny, going to the other side of the pile. Let's dig, but be careful. Down, Watch. You're a good dog, but this is no place for you to dig. Oh, children, look! Another bone came in sight. If you don't mind, please let me do the digging. Will you? Just sit here and watch me. The children sat back and watched Joe as he slowly dug the sand away. Even Benny was excited as he saw 12 small bones side by side in the sand. There ought to be another set just like these, said Joe. There they are, shouted Henry. And look, Joe, look at the arrowhead sticking out. Wow, this is a skeleton of a Native American. Before long, the whole skeleton lay before the excited children. Well, we can't move this skeleton because we haven't the right tools. It will be safe because nobody knows it's here. Let's just cover him up again. Cover him up? But we just found him. He's for our museum. I know, Benny, answered Joe. Will you leave him here just to me, please? We can dig some other day in the cave. Aren't you getting hungry now? Yes, I am. Let's go home and get some bread and milk. Jessie smiled at Joe. It was so easy to please Benny sometimes. Shall we take the bowl, Joe? She asked. Oh, yes. Take all the small things and put them in your museum. So the explorers took their collection of clam, hooks, and Indian things and started home for supper. Let's call this end of the island Indian Point, said Henry. And that's what it's always been called after that, even to this very day. And that's the end of our chapter for today. But I will give you a hint on what the next chapter is. It's a musical instrument. It has strings to it. It's not a guitar. And for those of us who went to the Philharmonic, there were several of them that were played right kind of in the front row, if I remember correctly. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see you soon.